Hey everybody, it's Ryan from Pi Records, and I'm here with Eric from the Trabants. How are you?
I'm great.
Thank you so
How are
much
you
for.
doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for getting up early and doing this. I know you're in Portland, Oregon, and lots of cool stuff happening up in the Pacific Northwest, and I'm happy to learn a little bit more. Tell me a little bit about the Trabants. I know they're kind of psychedelic, but on the surf tip.
Yeah, I like to say it's kind of like a survey of all instrumental music. Like over the course of a bunch of albums, I've had a chance to dive into different things, different themes. We did like the Spaghetti Western album. We did like a blues EP. And so everything's a little different, but there is some roots in surf, as I always think is kind of like one of the most mystical of the instrumental genres. So it's kind of like the anchor, but I love like library music and soundtrack music. I try
Yeah,
to bring all that into the mix and also have like rotating lineup. So I always wanted to have a band that there was like, everybody 100% wanted to be in there all the time. And so I wanted to make it, people could rotate in and out of the band and it kind of could keep the songs fresh. So over the years, we've done a lot of the same songs, but with different people. It like the songs kind of take on a life of their own over the course of time. And I think that's the coolest thing about the rotating lineup. And it's allowed me to like play in different places.
awesome. So, would you say it's a little bit more improvisational, or would it be just that musician's take on it?
I think it could be both. It depends on the songs that we do. Some songs can really take on a life of improvisation, and other songs might be more fixed. And I try to gear everything to the people that I'm playing with. And also that's the same thing with the albums. Like, it allows me to use like people I think are best suited to like the vision I had for that song on the record.
That's pretty awesome. Seeing how as you have um a pool of great musicians to pull from. Um, do you want to talk about some of the guys or girls that you work with?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably been like 30 people at this point. So,
Wow.
uh, and like, I've played with this guy who has a project called Point Lobo, Miles Senzaki, and he's played with Breakestra, and he's like the backup drummer for the Far Side. So it's like people are like that caliber that I couldn't keep them employed 100% of the time, but I can play some shows and get that element mixed into the band. So it's pretty neat that way. We had a trumpet player for a while
Yeah.
at the very beginning of the band when we were in Boston, a guy named Brian Murphy who later was in Man Man for a while, and or I think still is. Everything's crazy with the pandemic, but
Yeah.
the rotating lineup has also kind of made it lonelier for me in the pandemic. I've been
Uh,
working on music, but it's like it's not as much like, oh, I can have a little bubble of people that I moved to Portland just before the pandemic, so I haven't
uh,
totally again when things started here. So I was making tons of music, but really a lot by myself.
so, did you have anything come out during the pandemic?
Yeah, I did an EP of blues instrumentals that I'd done with Pete Curry, who plays in Los Straitjackets, and with Nick Lowe. And he played drums and bass, and we kind of did it for fun. And then we did the rhythm tracks together. And then when the pandemic hit, I missed playing out in the improving in front of people, because there's like a certain feeling there you can't quite get in your basement alone. So I was trying my best to feel like I was playing shows. So I did really like a live overdubs on those. So kind of did this happy medium of a very improvisational EP, but kind of like leaning heavy on the Freddie King kind of thing. Like I didn't use any reverb. It was all natural reverb. So just tried to do something a little bit different.
There's a there's a real sense of 60s music in your releases. You want to talk about uh how the different sounds of the 60s influenced you?
Yeah, for some reason, uh, the 60s has always pulled me as like a sonic, the sonic sounds of the 60s, the way things were mic'd up, the microphones that were used, the preamps, the compressors. There's just a certain sound when it's all kind of going together that I've always liked. So I've worked really hard to build a studio that kind of captures that and use a lot of older techniques. And even when I'm working digitally, to kind of keep a lot of the spirit of those kind of sounds of the 60s in there. Uh, but yeah, that has definitely been the anchor for me. I grew up in the 90s, which I feel was like a time when the 60s sounds were done in a high fidelity way. So that is also something I've always strived for, to do kind of a combination. Because like after all, we are in the modern age. It's like I could have 100% analog studio, but I do kind of do a mix at times. Allows me to use the best of both worlds, but still keeping the aesthetics of all the old stuff. Like I don't really use any plugins. So all of my effects are always happening outside of a computer. So my hybrid element exists even when I'm working digitally.
Awesome. So you
But
do have portions that are analog in your studio?
yeah, like all of my effects, all the reverbs and compression, like anything I would record into a computer goes out into the real world, into a box, and then goes back into the computer at some point. And then
Oh,
everything
nice.
kind of does that. And that's how I kind of like can build the sounds if I'm working digitally. But we did like a psychedelic album a few years ago called Freak Out.
Yeah, I like that
And
one.
yeah, it's one of my favorite ones too. And I've had like a sequel of that album written for a long time, but I hadn't had the right like lineup and time together to make it. And it's been like 5 years like in my head. And then towards a few months ago, I finally had a lineup out here, and we sat and did it completely analog, no computer, did all the rhythm tracks for all the songs. And that was great. We're all playing in the same room. And that just was like, when you hit the playback, it just sounded perfect. Like nothing achieves the sound like the real thing,
Yeah.
so you're all playing in the same room, you're using all the old mics, you're recording to the tape, and when you play it back, it's going to sound old because everything is old.
Yeah. Yeah, it
And
was an excellent sounding record.
yeah, well, so now we've tracked the follow-up, which just happened. So I finally got that together, and I'm really excited about that. And I'm mixing that currently.
Awesome.
But that one has a really old vibe to it, and it was really cool to have multiple days of everybody tracking together. Because also with the rotating lineup, I don't have the luxury of, oh, we worked on an album for a month, everybody worked out their parts, we rehearsed it a lot. Like a lot of times this may be the first Trabants record where I've spent more than 1 or 2 days on drums. Usually I have to kind of do it in a small period of time. I don't have people for long weeks. So this is great. We did probably like 5 or 6 sessions over the course of a month, which is like, feels like really luxurious.
Yeah. Awesome. So after moving to Portland, did you find I know you have a rotating lineup, but what did you think of the scene in Portland? Because you're also close to Seattle. So tell me a little bit about how you mix in with the two scenes.
Well, I just had started to dig in when I got here. So what I most discovered is in Portland, there's a huge country thing going on. Like everything I went to go see that was great was like country combos. It was really interesting. So I was starting to get into the idea of maybe doing like a real analog vibe place where you come in and do, you bring your like country combo, and we record into one mic on one track and
Oh
we tried to
yeah.
get it to say no mixing. And it's like you come in with your like old country stuff, and we come in and we make a record like that day or a single or whatever. And that was like the vibe I was getting off of the scene. Like there was a lot of vintage like vibes going on, but there wasn't quite anybody like capturing it like that in a super ultra vintage way. So I was actually toying with that idea the most. That was the most way that I was like feeling like I was intertwining with the scene here. Was like,
Very
oh,
cool.
maybe I could inject it with some like super primal, recording thing,
Yeah.
where maybe people could come and do 45s here in an afternoon. And I love the idea of you go in, you play, and it's like you come out. It's like we don't have to mix. Like I press play, and it's like if you like it, and that's the version. Like it's cool. It all happens at the same time. I
That's
thought that would be
awesome.
kind of a magical recording experience. So that's what I was toying with before the pandemic hit.
That's a great idea. I saw some YouTube videos. Now there's not much on that kind of recording, but I know Jack White at Third Man, that's one of his workshops that he does, that he allows you to record your own music with just one mic. And I'm totally get where you're going with that. I thought that was amazing, and it sounds amazing on vinyl.
Yeah. And then like, if you take like there's certain microphones, that may have, you could use like one microphone can have multiple things. Like certain microphones have like rejection on either side. So you're not hearing anything that's on the sides. You're only hearing what's coming from either face. So then the way you position people on this side of it, you can mix them, like
Yeah,
into the recording based on where you're positioning things around that microphone. And that's like a fascinating science in and of itself, because you are mixing, but you're also recording, and the performance all happens at the same time. It's like, when you nail it, it's so special. And you're like
yeah.
listening to a thing, you're like, God, I can't believe it's one microphone. We didn't mix it. It's pretty cool if you can get it.
Is that something that you just come into, that you're experimenting with, like you said, or is it something that's been ruminating with you for a while?
Uh, well, especially in this day and age, in the digital age, when we have like infinite possibilities through things that you can do digitally, to close yourself off to that many options actually becomes rather difficult. So it's like, it's something that's been ruminating for a while, because like the capacity to do it when you're so used to having the infinite choices that digital affords you. Because I also do like film and TV composing, so I use a lot of digital, and especially like the ultra modern, contact and all that. And it, not having any options, which is what the super ultra vintage way, like you have to really be prepared to make these like drastic decisions like this, and it can't be, all of the decisions have consequences that you're going to vibe out on 3 or 4 days later. So you've got to get it right and like still like it in 4 days. It's like you have to make a decision that's like based on some kind. You have to practice that. Practice limitations.
Practice, practice, practice.
Yeah, like practice not having options. Like even when we did these sessions to tape, and then I started to do some guitar overdubs onto the tape, and I didn't have the parts 100% worked out. And man, working to tape without things 100% in your mind, that's something you can only do digitally, because then you start to rewind and stuff so much that it like, it's different when you're doing it analog. And I had sort of forgotten that, because I hadn't overdubbed onto analog tape in so long. It is amazing. You get so used to all the choices that digital affords you, and then it gets
Yeah,
harder to work when you go back to analog.
yeah. Something you said, that you do a lot of composing and for film and TV. I would love to hear about what goes into that. It's a very interesting topic for me.
Well, my favorite thing to do is to license out Trabants songs. So I love when that stuff gets used, because that's what I work on, like the most, with the most love. So I put those in different music libraries, and there's a Yeti ad now that has a song called El Charo on Cinematic, and a Mountain Dew they had an ad that ran that was using one of the spaghetti Western songs. So I love to see those. But then also I scored this documentary film called Soldiers by this director, Tony Villani. And that's going to festivals and stuff. And that's been exciting to see. That's been one thing that's been going on during the pandemic. I'm a little bit sad that normally I would go to those festivals and meet new people and, do all that. But at the same time, it's interesting to like be in your base and you're like, God, this movie's like going to these festivals and people are watching them online. And it's interesting to still see your work get out into the world, even despite the pandemic.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So are the majority of your releases digital, or can you get them on CD or vinyl?
CD, actually haven't done a vinyl yet, which is kind of amazing, but I'm still looking for someone to, I'm talking to some people about a potential 45 right now, but I want to do a full length LP for sure. And I haven't
Yeah.
found the right situation for that.
You've got a lot of
I've
music
got 3
in your
albums.
catalog.
Yes, exactly. And I've toyed a lot also with doing like taking the best songs from the first bunch of CDs and making one compilation LP, like maybe on our 10-year anniversary or something.
Yeah,
I thought that would be really an interesting thing to do. And then also to kind of like fix things that bother me about those mixes, or do them now that I have more gear, that kind of thing.
so it sounds like you have a pretty expansive studio. How long did it take you to build your studio?
I mean, since I was 15, I've been working on it slowly, but yeah, it's taken a lot of time, and I've had a lot of different studios in a lot of different places. Gear has come and gone. I try to hold on to as much stuff as possible, though. But we're actually in my live room, and this mural is in my live room. And I moved into this place. This mural was painted in the 60s, and it's just been in this room.
Oh wow, that's awesome.
And, crazy. And it's like that when I saw this, I was like, oh, this place probably fits my vibe.
Yeah, totally. I can see that. So I see the drum set in the back there. When you're demoing songs, do you tend to play all the instruments yourself and then send it out to your friends?
I do, yeah. Or yeah, it happens in any different ways. But yeah, for the last year, it's definitely been a lot more of me trying out ideas like that. So I've gotten better at drums in the last year. A lot of practice.
So where can people find you? I know I found you through Facebook, and then I checked your music out on Apple Music. But if they want CDs, or they want to book you now that things are starting to open up a little bit, or get in contact with you and learn a little bit more about the band, how can they get a hold of you?
Well, Bandcamp is a great place to hear music. I love Bandcamp for all those kind of things, checking bands out. But our main website is trabantsmusic.com, and that has all the links to everything. And that's TRABANTS music.com.
Awesome. And I would imagine, but I haven't seen that you could possibly have some really crazy videos.
Yeah, no, I haven't done too much. I was thinking of actually starting to do some videos on TikTok about some of this vintage production, like the stuff that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Like, it's not a lot of information that's out there. There's nobody, if you even search vintage recording on TikTok, there's like nothing on there. So I was thinking of maybe building a little niche of, doing some videos of some crazy ideas like that.
That's an excellent idea, I think. Yeah. So, you have 2 drum sets back there.
Yeah, I have a couple of drum sets. I have a baby grand piano. I have a bunch of amps, a lot of outboard gear.
How did you move a baby grand across the country?
2 times. It was in California, and then I moved it to Boston, and then I moved it to Portland in like the course of 5 or 6 years. Yeah, it's pretty intense.
Oh my God, moving sucks, right?
Moving is the worst, especially moving a gigantic studio
Yeah.
Oh man, insane. And I have like one really old guitar that I got when I was in high school that now is like a like a $35,000 guitar. And I had to get a guy to drive it across the country, and like he would go pee in the rest stops and take it in with him. I had to pay him to drive it.
Wow.
Because I was like, I can't put this in the, like, it would be irreplaceable. It was irreplaceable. I either had to drive it or like, and I didn't have the time. And this guy wanted to do a vacation actually in Portland. And I was like, dude, just drive my car and my guitar out to Portland.
Nice.
So that worked out perfectly. But that's the kind of thing you have to do because moving is such a pain
Yeah, totally.
when
Totally.
you have a studio.
Yeah, at all.
Um,
At all. Like when you have a family, you have musical instruments, a large record collection.
Yeah, which is another thing. Actually, I brought a few things here to talk about in terms of records, because I
Oh
did, you know,
yeah.
I don't know, I did make this compilation for Ace Records a little while ago. That's called Cyclone Gallic Guitars a Go-Go,
Oh
and
wow.
it's a compilation of French instrumental bands, like all the bands that backed up the famous French singers in the '60s. This has like all their 45s, and I wrote all the liner notes with all the biographical information of these bands. And it's
Wow.
this comp, I worked on it for 3 years and researched it. And none of this stuff has ever been issued outside of France. And I worked on it for a really long time. It was a total labor of love. But everybody should check that out. Ace Records. Everything on that label is awesome. But if you like instrumental music, Cyclone, Gallic Guitars a Go-Go, 1962 to 66 is really good. And that brings me to a couple of like just recent records I've gotten that are weird that I brought to just show and tell, I guess. Well, since we're talking about instrumental music, I'll start with some like this record scene in Portland is really good. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
crazy, and you find stuff. It's really because like the price point is crazy. There's a lot of times I'll be in a record store in Portland. There'll be like records that I've written off because I'm like, oh, I'm never going to pay the going rate of $50 for that record. It's not badly I want it. But then I'll be in Portland and I'll be like, I'll find a copy for like 15. I'm like, oh, it must be scratched up or something. No, it's perfect. And I found myself picking up a lot of records like that. And just recently I went to this record store and like, these are records you just never find. Here's the Hollywood Tornadoes with the Grammy part 1 and part 2 on the B side, but the real 45 in perfect
Wow.
shape. Found that. The Astros Spacewalk,
Wow.
great 45. You never find that. Golden State Records. The label itself is probably worth the price of admission. I got this psych band, the Gurus. Oh, totally worth checking out. Like this crazy Eastern almost like pre-metal guitar playing. Bally High, the Rodgers and Hammerstein by the Iridescents. Look at that label.
Wow.
That's real. Amazing. I mean, to find that, that's like $150 record. And like I found that for like $20. Crazy. And lastly, the Frantics Werewolf. To find that in the wild, forget about it. So Portland, everybody should go to Portland to find records. And then I got a couple LPs here that are cool to share too, because I've been diving into one of the next albums I'm going to make is all Japanese inspired Aleki kind of guitar music.
You know what's funny is
Some bands have,
I heard a little bit of that in your music.
yeah, I've dabbled in it before, but I started to really dive in deep. Well, I know it's also like there's a lot of surf bands starting to cover those songs, like Black Sand Beach. Surfer Joe put out that Black Sand Beach 45, and the Coffin Daggers did a whole LP of Aleki covers. So people are kind of like turning onto it more. But I wanted to do like an original one. I always want to like write my own stuff. So I spent a lot of time like diving in. It is a whole different musicality. It's like you really have to dive into different note intervals when dabbling in that, when you're like trying to write that kind of music. So I really got into Takeshi Terauchi, who has there's a whole era of his music that is like fuzz, surf, but they're doing like classic Japanese like samurai songs. It's
Wow.
pretty insane. But that's like this record. It's just, I have no idea what any of this is, but it is amazing. It's like fuzz guitar and like kabuki kind of stuff.
Oh, wow.
And I don't really know what any of it's about, but the music is totally insane. And then I got into this guy Hiroshi Tsutsumi and his All Stars Wagon. But they have these awesome hit tunes by electric guitar.
Wow.
Nice. And it's like Japanese traditional music done in like a kind of like a surf way. This one too is the other one. It was those guys with their amazing elk guitars or whatever.
How old
So
are
I'm
those?
fascinated. Those are from the 60s.
Okay.
And so I'm fascinated by that stuff, like the exotic side of, like, I made that French comp because I loved those bands and nobody, like, I discovered those bands and I felt like I was discovering a world that nobody had heard before. And I discovered it when I was in Boston because I used to go to Montreal, which is only 4 hours away, and they have a lot of like European records that were pressed in Quebec. So you can go there and nobody wants them, so they can be really dirt cheap, including like French records that are expensive. There are Canadian pressings of those records that you can get in like budget bins there.
Wow.
Yeah, so I got really into the European music, and then in those bins, I would find these bands. I'd be like, "This looks like an instrumental band. I'm not going to take this home." And then I would take it home, and then from discovering one or two, I discover more and more bands, and it spilled over into me making that compilation. So who knows? Maybe a Japanese one. I've discovered a lot of Japanese music this year.
That's it sounds like you're having a blast just discovering new music and trying new things.
Yeah, I mean, that's, for me, that's like what it's all about, like just being creative all the time and making stuff. I wish I didn't have so much stuff in the vault. I wish it was more like, God, I'm like, how long would it be for me to even get a Lecky album out? It would be a long time. I have so many things like done. But maybe once the world gets open again and there's shows, maybe I can move it along.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I'd really be interested in hearing some of those records you have right there.
Yeah, I mean, even like these Japanese records, like I had to track them down because I wanted to hear them, and you can't even like YouTube them. There's nobody's like digitized them. There'll just be like a record will pop up here and there. I don't know. It's crazy. I've talked to people that have gone to Japan looking for these records, and they're all like in the back of these like porn shops under the bridges. You would go in, it's like all porn in the front, and in the back it's like stacks and stacks of like 60s Japanese vinyl. It's so crazy.
It's crazy.
My friend was talking about like, you can't read anything, so you have to like figure out how to find where these records, and you've never heard any of it, so you got to like judge by the cover.
Yeah. It's like the old days.
Amazing. Yeah, it's like the old days. But you have to do like 3 trips to be successful. It would make me too stressed out.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Eric. I really enjoyed talking to you, and thank you for waking up so early and sharing those records with me, with us. And I really wish you luck with your psychedelic album, and the stuff you're working on right now. And I just want to thank you and tell you that I really enjoyed our talk.
Yeah, this was really fun. It's nice to talk about all the stuff I've been doing. I've been just like doing it. So
Yeah,
it's nice, when I was kind of thinking about what we would talk about, I was putting it all together, and it's nice to get it out there.
it's nice to talk about music in like a just like person to person way, rather than just keeping your nose to the grindstone. Actually, just talking about it, enjoying it sometimes.
Absolutely.
All right, man. Well, you have a great day, and thank you. I hope you get to listen to some of those records today while you're chilling. And when everything opens up, I wish the best for you in Portland. I love everything that's coming out of the Pacific Northwest. And I would love to hear some of those recordings when you get them done. So keep in contact if you do any of those single mic recordings.
Absolutely. I would. Yeah, I'm dying to do it. So I'm hoping soon that'll happen.
Awesome. You have a great day, Eric.
All right. Thanks a lot. You too.